When it comes to getting married, it seems there are two sides. There are those who say it's better to get married young, and there are those who say it's better to wait until you're older to get married. So, what is the best age to get married? What does the evidence show? Is it better to wait until you're older and more established in life and have a better idea of who you are? Or is it better to find your lifelong partner from a young age? Today, we are going to look at the arguments of both sides. We're going to look at what the research shows, and then we're going to figure out what the best age is to get married. All of this and more on today's episode of Unhindered. Most things I talk about on here come from my everyday life, and this episode is no different. I have young adult children, and my 22-year-old son is looking for a wife. He is getting to that stage of life where he would like to find his person. And anytime I mention anything about this to someone, I often get the same type of response, a gasp. What? He's so young. Oh my gosh. No, don't rush. You have plenty of time. Why would you be looking for a mate now? And I always think because he's 22. That's the perfect time to look for a mate, in my opinion. So I thought I would look into this, and that is what I'm going to present to you on today's episode. Other things that I found people saying are, well, how would you possibly support a family right now? You have to finish college and get your career established first. Oh, go have fun. You don't want to be tied down yet. Go do all the things that you want to do in life before you get married. Nah, you don't want to settle down with just one person. Go out there and sleep around and have fun, be with all the different women, different partners now. I mean, how can you really know what you like if you haven't, sampled a lot? What if you get married and then you wonder like, oh, what would it be like to be with someone else? So go sow your wild oats before you settle down. Go have fun. Go live it up. You're not even old enough to understand what that commitment is. Gosh, forever is a long time, and your brain isn't even fully developed yet. You cannot make that commitment. You're going to change so much in your 20s. And when you're older and you know what you really want, and you know who you really are, that's a better time to settle down. I got married young and it was bad. We drifted apart. They kind of tell their story of how bad it was for them when they got married young and then they got divorced and how much they regret it. You hear that a lot. In doing my research for this, I came across a woman named Kimberly who wrote into the Chicago Tribune, and she said this: I married Steve at 22. I went from my parents' house to our house. I never dated in high school. Close to our first anniversary, I began to resent being bound to a marriage and a mortgage. All my friends were single. They were free, and I longed for freedom. This eventually led to fidelity problems. I had an affair. My husband eventually found out. It hurt him terribly, and I felt awful. I vowed to never do it again. The thought of losing my husband scared me. He's security in many ways. He eventually forgave me, and we stayed married, but there will always be a scar. I wish I had postponed getting married. I feel if I had become a real adult first, I would never have cheated. And Tiffany wrote into the Chicago Tribune, and she said, I'm 21 and I married on my 21st birthday. I had a big wedding in Walt Disney World. I loved my husband. He's 27 and he thinks being married is great. We own our own home and have money, and he thinks he has everything. I do too. We're doing great, but I feel trapped. I think sometimes I jumped in too quick. What if there's someone out there that I could love more with that magical, once in a lifetime love, and I missed it? What about college and work? I can't do either. I take care of a home and pets. My husband wants to have 2 or 3 children now. My own life is over. My single girlfriends do a lot of things I can't do. I go to the bars with them. They pick up guys or dance, and I feel guilty dancing with other men. And besides, as soon as they see my wedding ring, they say, see ya. On the other hand, my friends, male and female, think that I have it made. I feel so old. I think we could listen to people's stories all day long. Some people who got married young would say it was the best thing they ever did. Some people who got married young, like the two stories we just heard, would say that they regret it. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that, a lot of factors that play into that, age only being one of them. Um, and I've personally always been a proponent of getting married young. People in my family get married young. I got married young. I married my husband at 21. We've been very happily married for 23 years now, and I don't regret marrying him at that age whatsoever. But we're going to look at what the research shows and what is the optimal age to get married. I would never advise someone to rush into a marriage or rush into a relationship. So when people say, "Oh, don't rush, you have plenty of time," but what they're saying is, don't rush, don't try to find your person right now. Just have fun, like find lots of people, date around, or don't date at all. I don't really know what they're saying when they say don't rush, you have plenty of time. It's like they don't think that you should be making that a goal right now. Finding a mate in your early 20s should not be a goal. It's like somebody um, who wants to have a child when they're 14 and somebody says, "Oh, don't rush, you're too young." Yeah, 14 is too young, but to tell somebody at 22 that they're too young to get married, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. But having said that, I would never say like you should rush into marriage. So I agree with the don't rush thing in a way. Don't rush into a relationship. Don't rush into a marriage. I think it's incredibly important to marry the right person. I am a marriage counselor. I see all of the things that go wrong when somebody chooses the wrong person or gets married without really knowing them first. So it's not something to rush into. It is a very big commitment. But is there a reason in general to wait? Like you are too young, therefore just wait, just put that off. I think that marriage and family are very fulfilling. They are the things that really give life meaning. I think they give you more meaning and purpose than a lot of other things. In our day and age, career is put on a pedestal as the thing that is going to give you the most significance, the most meaning. And for some people, that may be true. But most people, after they have been married and had children and they look back, they would not tell you that their career was the most fulfilling or most meaningful thing in their life. People who have not experienced those things might feel that it's the most fulfilling thing because it is, because they haven't experienced those other things. But I think very few people would tell you that their career was the most fulfilling and meaningful thing in their life. Marriage is not like the end of your adventure. It's not like, oh, go on all these adventures and when you're done, you can get married and settle down. Marriage is the beginning of your future. It is the beginning of setting the stage of the rest of your life. Sharing your life with a companion is a wonderful thing. And waiting could mean losing the opportunity to have children. Women become less and less fertile with age. And I know so many women who waited till they were 30 ish to get married and then maybe 32 to start a family. And they had fertility problems. One of the reasons for that, that research is starting to show, is because being on birth control for that long does seem to be causing fertility problems in women. So if women got on birth control when they were a teenager and they stayed on it until they were in their 30s and then they try to have a baby, that's causing problems. But even just our biology in general, we are less fertile once we get into our 30s. So there are consequences for waiting to get married. I also think that waiting breeds selfishness. You get stuck in your ways over time. You get used to living alone. You get used to doing whatever you want to do, and then it's hard to meld your life with someone else because you do things your way. You're stuck in your ways. They do things their way. They're stuck in their ways. They like their house a certain way. You like your house a certain way, and you've been doing that for so long, and it can cause a lot more conflict when you try to come together then and merge your households. But if you marry young, you develop together as one. You grow together at the same time. You figure out together what you want your home to be like. You seem to be more connected. Your undeveloped brains actually start to grow together into kind of one brain. Obviously, not physically one brain, but marriage is supposed to bring you together and you're supposed to become one, right? And that is easier to happen the younger you are because your brain is much more plastic when you're young and you're much more adaptable. So you're more moldable and it's just easier. You're more flexible. I think that marriage, yes, does bring responsibility, But I believe it's better to embrace responsibility rather than to run from it. So living 10, 15, 20 years of your life doing your own thing and not really having any responsibility is not necessarily a positive thing. It might feel positive for you while you're doing it, but is it actually a positive thing? We have to think about that. Embracing responsibility from a young age is actually going to create better character and better people. Besides, two incomes are better than one. So when people talk about, oh, how are you going to support a family? Well, yes, you do need to be able to support yourself and your wife, unless your parents are going to let you live with them for a little bit, which might happen. And as long as you're working towards something, I don't think that's the worst case scenario. But the best case scenario would be that you can live on your own with your spouse and that you can financially support them. Do you have to have a certain amount of time in a career before you can do that? Maybe, maybe not. Do you have to be graduated from college before you can do that? Maybe, maybe not. Do you even have to go to college? No, definitely not necessarily. People go straight out of high school and get great jobs these days, especially in the trades. And then people have no problem with a young person of age 22 living on their own and trying to support themselves. But it's a lot easier if you have two incomes in one home. So, this idea that you can't get married young because you'd have to support someone, you're actually saving yourself some money if you get married young and you guys are in the same home. You have two incomes, which is better than one. Um, Also, I see a lot of people who get married older and they come into me for marriage counseling and they have his money and her money. They have never figured out how to merge their finances, or they are afraid to merge their finances. People who get married older tend to have prenups in the situation, because they're worried about losing the finances that they've built up. Um, Sometimes people who are older and are have some money worry, does the person really love me, or are they only marrying me for my money? You don't have to worry about any of that when you get married young and you build your wealth together. If you are waiting until you're 30 and you want to marry someone that's close to your age, that means that they have been waiting too. And this gives them a lot more opportunity to have a lot more sexual partners, to experience more hurt and pain in relationships, to have more meaningless relationships, to form bonds with multiple people. In other words, to bring in a lot of baggage to the relationship. And none of that is positive for your marriage. If either of you are having 10, 15 years of that, that's not a positive thing for your marriage. And not only is it not good for you, but do you really want that for your future spouse? Do you really want to say, I want to wait till I'm 30 to get married so that my future spouse has 12 years of time to have lots of partners and lots of meaningless or hurtful relationships? And I want them to bring all that baggage into our relationship. Think about that. Is that what you really want? The older that you are when you get married, the less chance that you are going to be a virgin when you get married, the higher chance that you are going to develop a porn addiction from all of the masturbation that you've been doing, or you're just going to be with a lot of different partners. You're probably not going to go through your 20s without being sexually active in some way. What does that mean to your future marriage? I have people who come to me who got married older and they developed some very unhealthy sexual habits. I had someone who came and he had been masturbating for so many years to a certain um, type of woman. And now he can only get turned on by that type of woman, a woman wearing certain things, and he just can't even engage in natural sexual relations with his wife, and they're coming to me for counseling for that. Those are the types of things that can happen when you wait until you're older to get married, and one of the reasons that I am a proponent for getting married young. And again, we're going to get into the actual research about this. Right now I'm just giving you my personal experience, my own thoughts. But fornication and years of masturbation or porn addiction, those are all so detrimental to a future marriage relationship. It's not something that you want. And I think that we're being unrealistic if we think people are going to make it to 30, 31, 32 without any of those things happening. So the sooner that you commit to your person, the sooner that you are going to save them from all the hurt that they would have been going through, all the baggage that they would be bringing, and yourself. And you're going to save all that pain of being with the wrong people in the meantime. My friend Zach got married at the age of 21, and he's been married a few years now, and they just had their first baby. And so I asked him his advice for this episode because I knew he had been married young. And he said, neither of us regret marrying young. And when we look at the current dating scene, we're quite happy that we aren't having to go through dating right now. We often hear horror stories from friends who are dating and are reminded of how lucky we are to have gotten married so young. This is probably most impactful when we consider our son and our future kids. We're excited about the fact that when our kids grow up and are old enough to be independent, we will still be relatively young. We'll be able to keep up with them as they get older, and we'll still have plenty of life left to live once they leave the house. No regrets from us. And I thought that was another really good point, and one that I also got to experience as someone who married young. I am in my 40s and all of my children are grown, and I already have grandchildren, and I can keep up with all of them. And I really enjoyed being a young mom, and I'm really enjoying being a young grandma. So that's another benefit. Thanks, Zach, for sharing that with us. Okay, so what does the research show? No more stories and personal opinions. Let's get into the evidence. So, the University of Virginia did a study and they asked the question, is marrying later always better? And in the end, their report said no. It says there is little evidence that those marrying over the age of 25 have stronger marriages than those who married in their early 20s. We know that teenage marriage continues to be a significant risk factor. But after that age, it is not a strong indicator of success in marriage as many believe it to be. So then I looked at the actual results of their study. They surveyed a bunch of people and they split them into two groups. They had a group of people who married between the age of 20 and 24. And then they had the group was anybody who married over the age of 25. So I'm not sure that's the way I would have designed the study, but I see what they were doing. They're saying, like, is it better to be in your early 20s or late 20s and after? I would love to see this redone with like people who married between 20 and 25 and people who married between 30 and 35. Just like, is it better to be early 20s or early 30s, and what are the differences? Nevertheless, I'm going to tell you what the study showed. So, one of the things they asked about was sexual satisfaction. The women who married young in the younger group, uh, 62% of them said they're sexually satisfied. The ones who were in the older group, 51% of them said that they're sexually satisfied. So 62 versus 51 in the women. For the men, 63% of the younger group is sexually satisfied, and 49% of the older group is sexually satisfied. So that's a big difference. That's a 14-point difference. They also measured their overall relationship satisfaction. In the women, the younger group, 73% of them said they're satisfied with their relationship, and the older group, 70%. So 70, 73, not a big difference there. And for the men, 81% of the younger group is satisfied with their relationship, and 71% of the older group is satisfied with their relationship. So the men who married older were less satisfied overall in their relationship. A large American study done in 2010 um, had participants who were born between 1967 and 1990, and then they did the study in 2010, and they found that among intact marriages, high quality first marriages were more likely among those who married in their early to mid 20s, but not beyond, based on being completely satisfied in their relationship. So those who married in their early to mid 20s, but not beyond, were more completely satisfied in their relationship. Those who married in their late 20s or beyond tended to have stable marriages, but they were not completely satisfied. Based on these findings, the author suggested that it was the absolute age at first marriage that made the difference, not changing cultural norms or other historical factors. They further suggested that the continuing rise in the median age of first marriage, that further research needed to be conducted to understand the marriages of those who marry at an older age, implying that these marriages were different than marriages of those who married at the right time. Research has also discovered that the ideal age for mothers to give birth is between the age of 23 and 32, as it is associated with a lower likelihood of non chromosomal problems in babies. So you're going to have the best outcomes for birth in mothers between the ages of 23 and 32. The study published in the journal Nature found that the risk of fetal abnormalities was lowest for women who were aged 23 to 32. Women over 32 had a 15% higher chance of uh, fetal abnormalities in their babies, while younger mothers had a 20% higher chance. So, younger than 23 has risk, and older than 32 has risk. In a 2022 study, researchers claimed that the optimal time for a woman to have her first child might be between the ages of 24 and 25, which aligns with findings in other studies as well. The researchers discovered that women who gave birth before or after this age range had up to a 5% higher risk of dying from any other cause within 18 years. The risk followed a U shaped trend, indicating that the further away they were from the age 24 or 25 when giving birth, the greater the risk. I thought that was really interesting. So, this is about giving birth, but that is directly related to getting the age that you get married. So, the best time for your body to give, for a woman's body to give birth, is between the age of 24 and 25. Not to say that you can't give birth any other time. Obviously, women give birth at many different ages. But I thought it was really interesting that there's a U shaped trend. The younger you are or the older you are, the more you're away on either side from the age 24 and 25. It doesn't just increase the risk for, they weren't saying like fetal abnormalities. They're saying the risk, and not the risk of a mother dying in childbirth, the risk of the mother dying within 18 years of giving birth from some other health condition. So, like, your body's healthiest time to give birth is around the age of 24 or 25. According to the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, females experience a slight reduction in fertility in their early 30s, and this will decrease significantly between the ages of 35 and 45. So, the closer you get to menopause, the less fertile you are going to be. A healthy 30-year-old woman has about a 20% chance of pregnancy each month. 20% at the age of 30. And by 40, they have about a 5% chance of getting pregnant each cycle. So you're going to be much more likely to be able to conceive in your 20s. The 20s mark a time of high fertility in both males and females. So our biology points to the fact that the right time to have children is between the ages of 23 and 32, which indicates that we should be getting married probably by 23. If the best time to have babies starts at 23 and the best time is when a woman is 24 or 25, that means that a woman, the wife, should ideally be aiming to be married by 23. Now, a lot of times the husband is older, so maybe he's 24, 25, 26, maybe 27, somewhere in there. The other thing I think our biology tells us is that we are supposed to get married young because we have a very high sex drive when we are young. We have very high sex drives when we are in our teens, late teens. Now, I know that that's not the optimal time to conceive, and that is not that's not been shown by research to be a great time to get married. But I do think that our biology says, hey, you're supposed to be mating up. It's about time to start looking for someone. You need to be finding someone. Like, our sex drive drives us to want to find a mate. So I think in your late teens, that is pushing you to want to go be around the opposite sex, go look for a partner. And then maybe by 23, you will actually have found and married that person. Also, our biology tells us that we are supposed to get married young, I think, because we are, if you, in my opinion, again, I'm getting a little opinion here, but in my opinion, we are most attractive between the ages of like 18 and 25. That is when we look most desirable for most people. So why is that? I think there's a reason, because you're supposed to be attracting your mate. So that is when you are most attractive. If you were supposed to get married at 50, you would be you're most attractive at 50, but we know that is not the case. So why are people waiting longer and longer to get married? According to the US Census Bureau, in 1950, the average age for a man to get married was 23, and the average age for a woman was 20. That was in 1950. Now in 2022, the Census Bureau found that the average age for a man to get married went from 23 to 30, and the average age for a woman to get married went from 20 to 28. So we've changed a lot in the last 70 years. And I think it's because culture has sold us a lie, probably multiple lies. And that's why I'm bothering doing an episode on this, because I'm all about talking about the truth, exposing those lies, exposing propaganda. And we just looked at all of the research. Well, not all of the research. We just looked at a lot of research, and we took a look at our biology. We looked at the evidence, and the evidence says we should be getting married young. We should be having babies young. So why aren't people doing that? Because our culture has lied to us. Our culture tells us you must go to college. Men, women, you must go to college. And with the current education system that we have, many people in their early 20s are just coming out of college or are still in college, and they're trying to navigate the job field, and they're told that their career is the most important thing in their life and that they have to be really established before they can even think about getting married or having children. We're also taught by our culture that you have to be able to provide financially great things before you can even think about having babies. So people, even if they do get married, they're waiting a lot longer to have babies because they think that in order to provide a good life for their child, they have to have all these financial resources, which is not necessarily true. You do have to be able to take care of them. You do have to put a roof over their head. You do have to be able to feed them, all of those things. But the things that people feel like they have to be able to provide these days are unreasonable. You do not have to be able to put them in private school. You do not have to be able to have a huge college fund for them. If you can do all of those things, great. But I promise you that your children will turn out okay without those things. Mine did. Um, Most people these days will not even consider getting married until they are established in their career. Also, our modern culture has tagged marriage as a limiting thing. And like I talked about earlier, they're encouraging people to go out, sow their wild oats, and experience life and do all these things. You don't want to be tied down and be married. I mean, people actually are getting married less and less because people don't value marriage as much. They don't want to commit to someone because they feel like it is going to make their life worse. And I think if you interviewed anybody in the past, you're going to find that a lot of people thought marriage and commitment and having that companion for life, that partner for life, was a positive thing, not a negative thing. So our culture has also told us that marriage weighs us down. And so people are putting it off because they don't see it as a positive thing. Modern feminism has discouraged women from having kids altogether, definitely discouraging them from having them young. They're telling them also that your career is going to fulfill you more than anything else. And kids are a natural progression from marriage. So they're kind of putting off both the marriage and the kids. And I think that our divorce rate of 50% is not helping at all. It is making people feel discouraged from the idea of marriage. And I think, again, there are a lot of factors that play into that. So I talked about earlier that a lot of people have stories of getting married young and regretting it, it being a bad thing. And so we do fall into that anecdotal fallacy often. Um, but a lot of people got married young and don't regret it. It's not universally a bad idea. If it were, we would see the majority of people who get married young regretting it, but we actually see the opposite if you look at the research. The majority of people that I know who got married young are thriving and they don't have regret. I think that the people who wrote into the Chicago Tribune are exceptions. And I also think that they um, possibly chose the wrong person or did not have some of the other factors going for them that we will get into in a bit. Those stories are often due to poor choices or cases of manipulation or abuse rather than the fact that they got married at too young of an age. The lies that culture has sold us about it being bad to get married young has had consequences. had a lot of negative consequences for our society. And one of them is that it has really promoted hookup culture. Like I said, people in their 20s are unlikely to go through their entire 20s not having sex, whether they're married or whether they're not. So if you aren't going to get married, what are you going to do with your high sex drive in your early 20s? You're going to probably end up sleeping around and hooking up with people that you have no intention of being in a long term relationship with, that you're afraid to commit to because you think you're too young to get married, or you're afraid of getting married. You think it's going to weigh you down, it's going to be a bad thing. Or you're having sex with people that you're not even vetting to see if they would be possible marriage material or not because you're not intending to marry them. Unfortunately, these kinds of relationships, as well as short term dating relationships without the intent to marry that person, end up creating more and more heartbreak and trauma. And then they lead people to be even less desiring of marriage and of real love because they get jaded and they think, what's the point? Like, I'm never going to find that. So this has created all kinds of bad things in our culture. Less children are being born, or people are having to seek a lot of fertility treatments, IVF, and things like that because they're waiting until they're too old to have children. And this idea that you need to sow your wild oats and be with a bunch of partners and play the field so that you can be ready to settle down and commit to one person is also a lie. How many partners do you think you need to be with before you will finally feel ready to commit to that one person? Do you think that being with a bunch of people actually increases the likelihood that you will want to settle down and commit to one person? Or does it decrease the likelihood of that? I can tell you it's not going to create greater intimacy in your marriage when you have one because neither of you is looking for that in your mate. You're not looking for someone who has been with a ton of people, and they're not looking for someone who's been with a ton of people. So, as I keep saying, there are a lot of factors that go into whether or not a marriage will be successful, and age is only one of them. My opinion as a marriage counselor is that the biggest factor is readiness. So, no matter what age you are, it's really about if you're ready, putting everything else that we've talked about aside. The biggest determiner of when you should get married is when you are able to understand what it means to be married and that you are ready to fulfill that role in a godly marriage with someone. This is what the Bible says about husbands and wives. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. So, everyone, regardless of age, should know what their role is supposed to be in marriage before they step into that commitment, and they should be ready to fulfill that role. So whether you are 18 or you are 60, I believe that your desire and your willingness to step into that role as a husband or as a wife is most likely the number one factor that will determine whether or not you have a good marriage. And there's a lot to pick apart in that scripture that we just read, right? A wife has to understand that she will be led by her husband, but not in a bad way, not in a negative way, not if he's the right person, because he will understand his role. His role is to love her as Christ loved the church, very love her in a self-sacrificial way. And so why would you not want to be led by someone who is willing to sacrifice for you? You would want to be led when the husband's role is to want to present his wife as pure and without blemish, to sacrifice himself for her. Husbands are to love their wives as much as they love their own bodies. If you are willing to give that to someone, to be that to someone, to become one flesh with someone, as the scripture says, if that's what you're looking for, if that's what you're desiring, then it doesn't really matter what age you are. All of the science still holds true. The ideal age is going to be to have babies is going to be between 23 and 32. The ideal age to get married is going to be in your early to mid 20s. That is what research shows. But you have to be ready. You have to understand the role. You have to be willing to fulfill the role. So you have to put that with the age. And I think that those who got married young and it didn't work out is because either they or their spouse were not ready. And so it is important not to rush. It is important to figure out if you're both in the ready phase, if you're both in the place that you need to be to make that commitment. Also, marriage is given to us to grow us. Yes, it is pleasurable. Yes, it is so enjoyable to have a life companion, somebody to come home to, somebody to share your burdens with, somebody to go and do things with. But the main purpose is not just for your happiness and pleasure. The purpose is to grow you and teach you and sanctify you. It is an instrument in your life for growth. And so the sooner you can get to that, the sooner you can use that tool on yourself for growth, the better. You should not be dating for the purpose of dating. The whole point of dating is trying to find your lifelong partner. And once you find that person, you should seek premarital counseling. And if it seems right, then you should make that commitment. Don't date for the purpose of having cheap, superficial relationships that are going to negatively impact the future marriage that you do have. So, in the end, it's less about age and it's more about readiness, emotional, financial, and spiritual readiness. And you can be that at a young age. I know there are a lot of young people, maybe young people listening to this right now, who agree with everything I'm saying. And they say, yeah, but you don't understand. It's just not that easy. I would love to find somebody, but I can't. And I want you to know that this episode is not in any way meant to put pressure on you or freak you out that you're not married yet or that time is passing you by. I know that it's hard out there. It's hard out there for all of the reasons that we've talked about today, all of the lies that culture has sold us, the hookup culture and everything else, social media. There's so many reasons that it's hard to find your person right now. The only point in this episode is just that I want more people to stop believing the lie that getting married young is bad. And the more people that can hear this episode, the more people who can know and understand this truth, the more we're going to impact culture in a positive way so that the dating scene won't be so difficult, right? If more people understood what I said today, the dating scene would be a lot better because everybody would be out there looking for their person and understanding all the damage that can be caused by not doing that. So, the point of this episode is to stop the lie and to stop people from being discouraged from getting married at a young age. Stop promoting this lie. Many of you have very good intentions when you say, oh my gosh, don't rush. You have plenty of time. You're so young. Why would you want to do that? I know you have good intentions. I know you had never really thought about the things that I brought up today. But again, you're going to see me do this in a lot of episodes. Stop only looking this far. You got to look beyond the end of your nose. You got to look into these things like I've done today, or just listen to me look into them for you. Think about what you're promoting. Are you promoting it because you've heard it in culture? Are you promoting it because it's truth? Are you promoting it because it's best? So I hope that this helped some of you out there, and I pray that you will share this with people. Please click the subscribe button. I am trying to grow my following so that I can get the truth out to more people. Please hit the like button, comment if you like this episode. All of those things really help me as I try to grow this channel. I appreciate your support. Take care.